the plan is I'm going to upgrade this CYMA CM701. It's a standard VSR clone. I will say I do like the hop unit on this versus some of the other clones. These are stupidly cheap and fully VSR compatible. So to start with, you're going to want to just flip it over and you're going to have 3 screws to get rid of. So nice and easy. So this one is the one that's going in the hop block. Pop that one out, put it to the side. Next, this one goes into the front section of the receiver. And then you've got the rear one here. You don't necessarily have to actually take this one out. I personally do, but you can actually pop the whole thing out with it in. But if you over tighten it, it can cause issues later on when you go back to assemble it. So I personally prefer to take it out. So there's your 3 screws. Next, it is just lift it out. And the next bit I'm going to show you varies by literally how they feel when they assemble these. So on most VSR clones, your mag release is going to sit in here. There you go. So right about here, you'll have your little mag release button, and that'll sit on a little plate with a little spring that sort of just rests in there. And your trigger guard, you just lift that up, pull it forward, and you're going to have your trigger guard. So this is obviously a different batch to the last one I worked on because, not that I'm against this, the hop block actually has the mag release built into it. So that's actually kept in place with a small plate, 4 screws. That adds an extra step to when you want to get to the hop unit, which we'll do a bit later, but it does mean this isn't going to fall out, because that is the main gripe with a VSR, is the mag releases are a bit finicky. So for now, we can take this and put it to the side. So for all your VSR clones, triggers, it's very, very easy. You've got 2 screws, one here at the front, one here at the rear. Depending again on the clone that you have, these will be flathead, Phillips, Allen. These are Phillips. Here you've got your spring guide stopper, so this little silver bit. Again, depending on the strength of the spring, you should be able to just tap this down. So flathead screwdriver, tap it down. If you've got a weak spring, it will come out very easy. If you've got a slightly beefier spring, that's under a bit more tension. You can actually just take the screws off, get a flathead under there and pull the whole unit off as one. So as I said, 2 screws here and here. Depending on what trigger you're going to be putting on, these are going to potentially come with little crush rings. So you can see that's got a little crush ring on it there. Keep those to the side because you might buy a trigger that doesn't come with them. Next, we're going to hop onto the rear one. Same thing, so you've got your screw with the little crush ring on there. Put them to the side. And then here, there's a few ways you can do it. As I said, you can try and pop your spring guide stopper out, or you can just pull the whole trigger off. And that's it. That is your 45-degree trigger. And if you go and look at my shorts playlist, I do a quick video discussing what the difference is between something like a 45 stock trigger and an upgraded 90-degree. So for this video, we are going to put a 90-degree trigger on. I actually did a video on this recently. If it's come out yet, this might come out before it. But as with all my VSR builds, I'm going to be using Springer Custom Works V9 trigger. This is a V9.3, which is the latest one, but any of his triggers are really, really good. So at this stage, for ease of explanation, we're just going to take the cylinder out and put that to the side because we'll talk about that in the next video. But once you've got to this stage, installing your trigger is very, very easy. And you can do it a few different ways depending on how far you are with your cylinder assembly. But we're just going to get the trigger on there. So, and the installation is the same for pretty much every upgraded trigger. Not specific to this one, whether you're using Maple Leaf, Action Army, Airsoft Pro, they're all very similar installations. So with the Springer Customs, it comes pre-installed with the spring guide stopper in. Because we haven't got the cylinder in, we're not going to want to put this in just yet. We'll put that in after we've done the cylinder upgrades. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that out. So again, I've just done a video on this, but that screw comes out, your spring guide stopper drops down, and you can put those to the side. So this is very easy. You're going to want to flip your trigger over and line it up with the holes that are already there. And then again, this very much depends on the trigger you've got, but with the Springer Custom Works, it comes with its own set of screws. You're going to want to take your screw and your crush, and you're going to want to line that up with the existing holes, like so. Take your second screw, do the same thing with the rear, and then go ahead and snug those down. And this is the same for pretty much every clone, whether it's the CYMA, a JG, the Well. The Wells are my least favourite of the clones. They tend to be a bit more odd in terms of their sizings. But that's the trigger on. Literally just those two screws there. So the crush ring goes on, screw goes through it. If you're having problems with, because again, this is all factory made in China, Asia, wherever, so the tolerances vary. So one tip I'll give you now, not specific for this trigger, but triggers in general, is if you're having problems with your sear not catching, you can shim this trigger using AG shims between the receiver and between the trigger. Shouldn't need to do it, but you might need to do it, and it's easier to do it at this stage. So that is the trigger installed. What you would normally do, and we haven't done the cylinder yet, is you'd put your upgraded cylinder with your whatever you're putting it. In this CYMA build, we're having a new cylinder head, spring guide, spring and piston, which will be a 90-degree setup, be a wasp. You'd put all of that back in, and you can hold the trigger down. So there's a sear here on the Spirit Custom Works. If you push that forward, you can then freely slide the cylinder in from the back, let it go, make sure it's lined up, and then you'd normally go ahead and put your spring guide stopper in, which just drops in like so. And then for this one, you obviously have this screw here that you're going to be putting in. Most others, like the Action Arm, the Maple Leaf, that literally just press fits in once you've got the cylinder in. The reason we haven't put it in straight away is because obviously if that goes in first, your cylinder's not going to get past it. And that's it. Things to be mindful of when you're putting a trigger in is the very, very first thing. Make sure the trigger you're using, obviously if you're using a 45 trigger, 45 being the angle of the sear, so you need to match that 99% of the time. If you're upgrading something, you're going to be going for a 90-degree trigger, and then you're going to want a 90-degree sear, which is this. This angle here comes off at a 90-degree rather than a 45. So you need to match those. The screws might be different. Again, I think that's primarily if you're going for things like the SSG10, because these are M3, I believe, and I think the SSG and maybe even the PDR receivers. But that's it. That is, a trigger is probably the easiest part, right up there with the cylinder. It's only the hop units and barrels that are a little bit more, or can be a little bit more involved. Actually, I'll show you the shim thing. So sometimes these receivers are slightly off spec and they can be a bit narrower. And because they're a bit narrower, the sear sits ever so slightly further in the cylinder than it would usually. And what can happen on some pistons is that sear sits so high, there's not enough room for it to flip back up, so it can't catch the sear. As the piston goes over it, it's constantly touching it and it can't flick up and lock against that face. So in that instance, you need to shim the trigger away from the receiver to give you that clearance. It's not a really, really common issue, but while I'm doing the video, I might as well tell you guys how to do it. Let's pretend that these are a pack of really cheap AEG shims. What you would do, you would take 2 shims, and before you put the trigger unit on, and you would put them at the front of the trigger. So before your screw goes in, you would put this on your receiver. So you're going to be putting them on like that, and then the screw will pass through that, and you'll do the same at the rear. Usually the AEG shims are like 0.2, 0.5 mil, and that's generally all you're going to need to get that clearance if you are having a QC issue, because the QC usually are just a few fractions of a mil. But by doing that, you can alleviate that problem if you're having it. CYMAs don't seem to have it too much. It's mainly the Well that I've had it with. But that's it. Any questions, ask them in the comments. I'm hoping to get all of these videos done within the next couple of weeks, so that there'll be a whole series or a whole playlist where you can look at the different steps from the trigger to the receiver, just to get everything in. And then hopefully I'll be able to do some episodes on fine-tuning things like precision guide rings for your build, because one guide ring does not fit multiple guns. You need a guide ring specifically for your build. But hopefully that's a good starting point for your upgraders, getting that trigger done. And next I'll do the cylinders. So we've done this half, and then we'll move on to hop units and barrels. If you like the kit, guys, remember to like, subscribe and all of that stuff, because it does help keep me motivated to do this. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Any questions, again, just shove it in the comments, and hopefully I'll get the next video out soon. Bye bye.